Welcome to the second episode of the Newfoundland Lens, where myself, Michael Windsor, and Corey Babstock is there with me, and we're going to talk the whole episode about icebergs.
All about the bergs.
We'll talk about stories and where you can find them, best way to photograph them, different times to photograph them.
Sounds good.
So go ahead, Corey, tell us a story about your iceberg adventures.
I can talk about when I was a youngster and all we wanted to do was jump from one ice pan to the other when the icebergs ran. Went going overboard with a Mary Maxim sweater on, and it ended up down around my ankles from the water, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. So,
For sure. Yeah, when it comes to what lenses to use for icebergs, I guess we kind of start with that. You can shoot from shore with long lenses, and that always works out. You know, if you can't get on the boat and get out there, but we always recommend the people that we go on our photography tours is getting the Zodiac or some boat to get on because you're just a lot closer.
Yeah.
And then you can really pick up the details on the ice.
Yeah.
And all that good stuff.
And a lot of times the icebergs don't follow any itinerary. They're not necessarily going to go to where you can see them by driving, or you might see them from land far off. But the advantage of being in the Zodiac is that you can go to where they are in the water, in their own element. So in experience, I highly recommend.
In Zodiac is like, you get, well, not too close because they're always dangerous, of course.
Right.
But you get more of a sense of scale, like how big these things are.
What do you use mostly now when you're shooting bergs?
So if I'm out taking pictures of icebergs and the Zodiac, and usually uses my 24 to 105,
Right.
because you can, you know,
It's
when
good
you're on a
range.
Zodiac, getting closer and back, so it's good to have a bit of zoom there. So you got options. You could take the whole thing, or you could zoom right in. That's pretty cool if you zoom in on the iceberg. A lot of people goes out and they'll take pictures, but it just tries to get the whole thing. But I
Right.
find if you even take a zoom lens out there with you, you can take pictures of the details of the ice.
Yeah, you
Or
get
the
those
color.
nice blue veins going through them, and you can get that really, really cool with a close-up shot.
And even the color of the green where the sun is reflecting through the water is pretty cool. And that's why I like some more of the detail sometimes than
Right.
anything really.
I find, yeah, sometimes the ice, the texture and the detail on the iceberg is nice too. But I do like, especially when you're dealing with bigger icebergs, if you can get a building in the foreground or something in the foreground that gives an indication of change. So you have a great shot of an iceberg just in the blue hour behind some houses. Really cool because it does give. A lot of times I don't think people realize just how big these icebergs can get, right? And so when you've got something to measure it against, it makes a cool shot.
They're massive, 9 times bigger on the water. And I
Yeah.
always, people ask me when I'm out taking pictures and sense of scale, I always say, just remember if you put an ice cube in your water and you can see the difference of how much is actually in the ice cubes
Right.
in the water versus above. But back to the blue hour, basically that's my favorite time to take pictures of icebergs.
Yeah.
Especially if you could go and take a picture that's right next to like a light pole or something with a light
That's
on that's kind of
some
an
light.
orange.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of an orange glow from it. So then you got the warm and the cool colors, which I find
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
Like, no, that particular shot I'm talking about, and I forget where it was taken. It's in your book, I know that. But that was one of my favorite shots of yours because you did have that sense of scale, but you had the warms and the cools in there as well, and it looked really good.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the iceberg that was up in Fairyland. There, I think it's 2017 now, I believe. It's been a while now. And I find too that every season there's always one iceberg that shows up that trumps the rest of them. So I remember there was one that was on Fairyland, which is the one you're talking about.
Yep.
Then there was one a few years ago before that, and that was one there in Fort Amherst, it's right behind the lighthouse. And the same thing, I did the warm and cool during blue hour. And I think there was one in 28.
That's the one that was down by Fort Amherst. That's a treat because you don't normally get a lot of ice that far south, right down around town. Not as common as, like, say, in Twillingate or Northern Peninsula.
When it comes to where to see them, so basically icebergs, what we see here, calls it the iceberg alley. So it comes down from the icebergs actually starts in Greenland,
Right.
and there's 2 years before it leaves Greenland and gets down to Newfoundland and Labrador. So it comes down the coastline on the Labrador Current, and it'll pass by Labrador, and it'll come on down depends on how many icebergs we get. They can come right on down as far as southern Newfoundland, which is
Right.
in Fairyland, and they can show up in any cove.
Mm. Yeah, it was cool. Not this summer. Summer before, I had a group on tour, and one of the ladies was from Virginia. That was what she wanted. She had two things. She wanted to see puffins, and she really wanted to see the icebergs. And it was later in the season. I guess it was getting close to the end of July, which is pretty late. But there was one grounded in a cove down by Old Bonaventure. And we went down, we hiked out and tried to find it. We couldn't find it by hiking. So we went out in Zodiac after at a Trinity and got out there. And, that's when they ground in a cove like that, you can almost count on them being there for some repeat visits. But she was quite excited. When we got out there, it was rare to see them, still around that late in the season.
Yeah, and when it comes to the season icebergs, leading into that, is that I usually find if there's a lot of sea ice that comes
Yeah,
down the coast of
pack
Newfoundland,
ice, yeah.
that's when we'll pack ice. That's when we'll get a lot of icebergs. I find they come down, and the icebergs gets trapped in the pack ice or sea ice, and then when the wind changes, the sea ice leaves, but the iceberg stays behind. So I usually
Right.
find and they usually come down. What is it? March. Usually, that's when you start kind of seeing the
March and
first
April,
few.
yeah, like March, April, May is probably one of the busiest times, in my experience anyway.
Oh,
But like I said, you don't know, they could show up really late in the year too, like that particular one, that not last season, but the season before. We always tell everybody on tour, Michael, Mother Nature, you can't schedule it.
oh no, they already.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
But I find that they usually are gone by July. I mean, you might get them in July, but mostly by mid-June is usually
Yeah,
when they're starting to disappear. 4 years ago, I think we had a bumper season,
yeah.
and they were here until mid-July.
I was gonna say I went out to Twillingate in May, and there were a couple, they were far off, and then I drove down through Greenspond, down through the loop that way, and there was another one like far off, but I didn't see any down around Bonavista this year at all.
You know, but up around St. Anthony, up
Yeah,
around that area, they had nice few icebergs,
it did.
and
Yeah.
one actually showed up there. I think it was like mid or almost the end of July.
Is that Brighton?
No,
There's
I
one.
think it was up there in St. Laurent,
Okay.
right now, up northern tip there, from up in Labrador.
I know there's one that people were driving from St. John's even to go out and see, and it was like a 6 or 7 hour drive, right?
But,
Do you use the provincial iceberg tracker at all, or
yeah, so anyone that do come here that wants to see it or find a way to get to the icebergs, there's always locals. Ask them, such as us or anyone you see on the side of the street. Pretty much, they'll help you if they know. The Newfoundland Labrador got a iceberg finder. That's the name. I think it's icebergfinder.com, I believe it is.
I believe so. You keep talking. I'm gonna look it up. Iceberg Finder,
Yeah,
yeah,
so that is a good way to find icebergs. So as from the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador, and they depend on people taking pictures and uploading the location so people can know where it is.
yeah,
The other option too is if you go to social media, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there that show icebergs and stuff.
absolutely.
There's
Yeah, there's
one,
one Newfoundland Labrador iceberg reports.
yeah. So
It's really
Diane, she's the admin for that, and she does an awesome job, and she keeps out I guess, the bad stuff. So it's just all professional and
right.
locations for icebergs. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, she insists that if you post, you have to post the date and the location and a photo, just so people aren't going like seeing a photo from 3 weeks ago and thinking that it was just taken yesterday. It really helps. It's the last thing you want to do is drive 6 or 7 hours and go like, well, that hasn't been here for weeks.
So usually, well, as everyone knows, social media, you get things pretty fast.
Yeah,
But the other thing too is like for us is that where we're traveling so much, we get to see icebergs, and we have a lot of good relationships with the boat tour owners.
yeah,
So if any iceberg pops up, then we'll know right away, so we can make sure we get you people there.
yeah. I had a mother and daughter from the States really want to see an iceberg, and we had almost given up on it. We were told there was one down in Trinity, and we drove down to Trinity, and it had moved off. But it goes to knowing the local people. When I was speaking to somebody down there, they said, "Oh yeah, it moved off, but it's just halfway between here and down to New Bonaventure. We went on, we sallied forth, and we were 1.5 kilometers and over the bank down to the old quad trail. But when we came down to the berg, it was only about 200 feet offshore.
Oh, that's cool.
You would never have known it was there. You would never have known where to go. Sure wasn't somebody local there to point you in the way.
Like I said, and it's always good when you bump into locals and ask them where it is. Everyone is always the good thing about Newfoundland is that there's always someone there to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was one time a few years ago, I remember there was a Great Cove, and there was an iceberg out there with an arch in it. And
Right.
if you see an iceberg with an arch, they're the
That,
money
yeah.
shots. They're unique, and as you see one, you just got to go right away because you don't know when it's going to break up. This particular day, I couldn't get out there, but then the next day, I went out, and even on the way out, I'm stressing out because I want to get there before the thing break up because I sent pictures on social media. So on the way out, there was road construction, so it's delayed by like an hour and a half or so. I was like, "Oh man, come on!" But I think it was probably like a Wednesday or Thursday, so not a lot of traffic or anything midday. So I got out there, and I was still there, thank God. You see it, man, it's amazing. And as you know, we're here all the time, and we see icebergs, but still, when you see
Oh,
it, it's like, wow,
magic.
it's
Yeah,
pretty,
especially, yeah.
it is pretty cool. Like,
Yeah.
so we got out there, and I had a drone as well. So I went out and I took some pictures of it first, and then took some kind of long exposures, but it's kind of foreground in the front there. And I took my drone and I flew my drone through the hole of the
Yeah.
iceberg,
Awesome.
which is kind of scary. I do have a
Yeah.
video, and let's see if I could post that in the YouTube video as well.
That'd be cool.
And then I got back and I said, okay, and I was hungry. So I said, well, I got most of the pictures. So what I'll do, I had some chicken and rice there in a bowl. So I
Yeah.
said, what I'll do is I'll put my camera on the back of my truck, and I was eating the chicken and rice with
Yeah.
the camera right next to me. And while I was starting to eat, I heard just like thunder. And anyone that hears it,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyone hears it, they know it's thunder, and they start breaking up. And so I just, of course, grabbed my camera and just start pointing and just hold my finger down and just shot.
Works
So
first.
I got the whole thing collapsing.
Awesome.
That was pretty cool. And the only thing is that I was the only person there besides two people from Saskatchewan, which
Well,
they came. It was a man and woman that came here on vacation, and they wanted to see an iceberg. And that was the first time they saw an iceberg. And they just thought it was like, the first time you see it happens all the time. But you
well,
just like,
they're gonna be disappointed for everyone to see.
yeah.
What is it?
So then I explained to them exactly, what you saw and, how rare it is.
Right.
And then they kind of went off holding their hands all joyful.
Excellent. Yeah, I know I've seen a lot of icebergs, and I've only seen one myself do something while I was watching. Similar situation as you, but we were in Zodiac out of Bonavista, and it was one of the bigger bergs I've seen, but it was one of these big flat ones, one very flat on top and not a lot of detail to it. And we were just about to leave, and we heard that same thing you heard, that it was like a gunshot going off. You got a vibration from it, and
Yeah.
one amazing. As you said, we as Newfoundlanders, and especially us, me and you, and people in photography, we're out doing this stuff all the time. But seeing that really, my heart just went right up into my mouth, and it was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I've seen it. But it's similar to people who were with me who this is their first time. They were very excited about it, but I don't think they appreciated just what an experience it was to see that, with their own eyes. That was really cool, really special.
Yeah, that's what I find too, is you get out there and you get in these moments and you feel your heart start going boom, boom, and you get more with the excitement. It's so awesome.
Yeah. I think that's why we like our job so much. It's like, every day it's people say, "Oh, you're seeing the same stuff every day." I said, "No, I'm not. It's different every day."
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, every single day there's something new to discover or something. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm
Yeah,
hoping
we should know, hopefully, around beginning of March of what's coming down the coastline.
the biggest takeaway for anybody visiting and going on tour with us is to use those tools that we talked about, the iceberg tracker, or even reach out to us directly and just see what the iceberg situation is like before you try to plan your dates around there. Michael, and I mean, we've had this conversation with everybody we've ever gone with. There's very few things we can guarantee, but we will do our very, very best to make sure you see what there is to see.
Oh, yeah, like I said, we don't know where they're going to pop up to, any cove, tickle, or bay. They show up anywhere. So if there's any distance at all that we can get there, then we'll get you there.
We're supposed to make it seem like we're suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about going in Zodiac, seeing the icebergs and, how cool that is. I was thinking on the number one experience I get people talking about when they get here, especially when you go to icebergs, in Zodiac looking for icebergs, is how cold it is. It's really, these are huge, massive chunks of ice. So it's going to be cold. So my suggestion to you is to A, dress appropriately, but B, bring extra stuff. When you go down Zodiac, you're going to want one of these on your head, gloves, whatever you want to bring with you. It could be 20 or 25 degrees Celsius on shore, but when you get like 2 or 3 kilometers offshore within, 500 meter or 500 feet of an iceberg, that temperature drops real quick. The water is right around the freezing point. So it gets cold, and there's a joke here in Newfoundland. We say you don't come to Newfoundland for the weather, and you certainly don't come to Newfoundland for the weather in the spring. Damp, it can get cold even in June.
Yeah. I always recommend, like you said, make sure you bring lots of layers, I find.
Yes.
Like the shirt, sweater, and the warm jacket. And even if you have some rain gear as well. And I even
The big
find
thing, I find your hands are
the
what gets really cold in Zodiac.
gloves as well, for sure.
Yeah.
And like I said, it is chilly, but you get used to it. And it depends, I guess, where you're from as well. If you're
Yeah.
coming from Florida versus somewhere from Alberta, then you know the difference.
Yeah, I know. I've had a few Texans out there, and I was like, it was pretty much in the summer. I think we weren't even in survival suits. I just had the life jacket vest on, like a short sleeve. They were bundled up in survival suits and stocking caps.
I know a little bit off topic, but I remember once I went to Florida, and I think it was 18 degrees Celsius, and it was all with shorts on and swimming in the swimming pool, and those people down there with a scarf and mitts on. So it all
Right.
comes down to what you get used to, right?
Talking about the weathers, we've had some really hot summers too these last couple of years. And again, I've had
Yeah.
people from down south come up, and they said, we came here to escape the heat. And it was actually hotter here than it was down south. So
Uh,
you had to bring a little bit of everything, because that could change like that.
Even in June, one day you could have shorts on, and the next day you could have your rain gear on.
100%. It could happen in the span of an hour.
Yeah. Time you leave St. John's, it could be cloudy, and it could be sunny in Clarenville, and then time you get to Bonavista, it's going to
That's
be
crazy.
raining again.
If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes.
Oh, for sure. So I guess we'll jump in a bit when it comes to taking pictures of icebergs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to take pictures of icebergs at different conditions, and every single one you do is going to be always different. So we'll start on a sunny day. If you want to take a picture of an iceberg and it's just a sunny day, then always bring your exposure down. I usually bring it down by a stop or two, because if not, like icebergs are not really white, but when the sun shines on them, it do. So really bring your exposure down. So when you take a picture of it, it's just not too overblown, right?
Have you ever used ND filters for shooting the icebergs?
Yes. So if you want to use an ND filter, you can do that. But you got to remember when you do that, the iceberg, if it's grounded, really grounded, then you're safe because the water will be moving, but the iceberg won't be moving. But if you look at the iceberg and it's rocking and you use an ND filter and you slow down the shutter speed, then the iceberg is going to be blurry as well. Now, unless you're looking for some this artistic thing of a blurry iceberg, then go for it. My favorite time taking pictures of icebergs is blue hour. So blue hour, for anyone who don't know, is right after sunset, within that hour before it gets dark, sunrise, an hour before the sun comes up. So anyone, if you take a picture, you notice the sky is kind of like got that blue tinge to it. And like I said earlier, when it comes to the warm colors of like street lights or the blue of the sky and stuff, I really like that kind of different warm and cool colors. Well, when you're taking pictures during that time, you got to slow down your shutter speed most of the time, because same as with the ND filters. So when you do that, you just got to make sure the iceberg is grounded, and you got to play with it. You need a 1 second exposure or two. If you could go 30 seconds, great, which means it's not moving. But
Right. I was going to try something, if I could find one grounded that was close enough to shore that you could actually get a spotlight on it too, to do some light painting at night with it.
yeah, I tried it one time or a couple of times. It's kind of I found when you shine the light on the iceberg in the nighttime, the iceberg now is white again because same as the
Right.
sunlight directly on it. It's
Okay.
okay, as
Yeah,
as cool because it's something that people didn't see or
different.
won't usually see
Yeah,
different. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's good.
that's cool. Some of my best iceberg shots I had this year is right at sunset, especially when all the forest fires were in Quebec. So we had a lot of that particulate in the air, and we had these really nice pink sunsets. There was an iceberg that was grounded just down at Kings Cove, and there's some great shots of that one at sunset. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know why, but sunset, of course, with the nice light on the iceberg is
no,
amazing.
yeah, magic.
The only other time is in the fog. Taking pictures of an iceberg in the fog or overcast is underrated because when it's overcast, you get the real colors of the iceberg. You get that blue cast to it,
Yeah,
and like did you
and
get the blue lines and all that good stuff in it as well.
and the detail's not blown out by the sunlight on it either, so you tend to see more texture and everything in it as well in the overcast, I find. Yeah. All right. So one thing, Michael, I know we talked about it briefly there about keeping safe distances from the icebergs. I just want to finish up by saying if you go out viewing the icebergs, if you're using a professional tour organizations like we use, those guys are really good at what they do and they know to keep a safe distance from the icebergs. They could roll in an instant, and like we talked about earlier. You don't know when that's going to happen. Might look like the most solid stationary thing on Earth, and then 30 seconds later, it's rolling, and you've got a 10 or 15-foot wave or a 20-foot ice wall coming at you. So all I would stress is that if you're going out with somebody who's not a professional or might not be aware, make sure you make them aware to stay back. It's all well and good to get that perfect shot, but no perfect shot in the world is worth dying over. So yeah,
Sure.
make sure that they're getting hurt, right? So just like everything, common sense, stay back, stay safe, and enjoy shooting.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember one time I was like with my father actually, and we were looking at an iceberg, and all of a sudden we looked and we saw some bubbles under the boat, and I was like, "What's going on?" So we said, "Get out of this," and then we lift. The piece of ice actually broke off from under and came up
Right.
through. So like, if you don't know what's going on, then it's easy for the iceberg to come up and tip your
Right.
boat over even. So
Yeah.
as always, I think this is keep more than twice the distance of how big the iceberg is away from the iceberg.
Yeah.
That's the rule there.
Eh,
But yeah, so thanks everyone for coming out for our second episode. Next episode, we'll start we get into puffins. I like
Woohoo!
puffins. You get into the puffins.
Shirt. Show them your shirt.
It's just the puffin shirt. You see that on YouTube if you want to see the puffin shirt. And as we sign off here from the rock, keep your eyes on the horizon and your heart in Newfoundland.
Hope to see y'all this summer.
See you later.